I just let in Rachel and I just let in Dr. Hubbard. I put the Angela Connor in the waiting room with 9 other people that are not familiar to me. So if you guys can hear me okay, I'm going to go through the current participant list so that you know who all is on, okay? I do show just the SMSD camera that you guys generally always have on. I guess that's the screen for me. Good. I see Jill. Good afternoon. I see John. I see Lindsay. Hey, all. I see Mike. I see Rachel. I see Jay. I see Dr. Hubbard. And who might we be missing?
Russ is not here today.
That's right. That's right. And we got an email that he was not going to be here. So good afternoon. How's everyone doing? It's been a while for me seeing you all, but I'm guessing, have you all seen each other's faces prior to today? In meetings as needed, or is kind of everything's held up until this meeting today in terms of you all talking?
Yeah, I don't think we've had any discussions in the interim.
Nope.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I do remember the last time we met was sort of our first wrap up of your formal IBB bargaining. The bulk of the meeting was talking a lot about process items that worked, things that didn't seem to work, things you wanted to capture to carry forward, sort of best practices and for you all going forward. That felt like that was the bulk of the meeting. We also did flag a couple of items that you all really never processed through IBB last time, but you wanted to sort of keep out there. And then the other thing we did was a standing COVID update, of course. Now, we didn't, I don't think, set the agenda for this meeting. Instead, I think we said everyone would come on and we would see, what was going to be on your plate at this point in time. Now, since then, I know there have been some emails back and forth that you do have a group of elementary and maybe middle teachers that are going to want to share some info today. I do see 9 of those folks sort of just in the waiting room. I'm assuming they know they'll be there till you bring them on. But I know the meeting wanted to start with the district sharing a topic. I don't know if it's new or if it's ongoing. So I think we'll start there. And then I think that we can sort of set up or frame what we've got these teachers coming on to talk about and go from there. I think that's probably all the time you're going to have for this meeting, but we'll see how that goes. Does that sound okay for an agenda today?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Okay. Who wants to kick off for the district in terms of the 10, 15 minutes you guys wanted to discuss an issue?
Me?
Gonna go?
Okay. Yeah, guys, I put the document in our shared folder, I believe, so double check me. It's called 187 Redline. And I also have hard copies if you would rather have a hard copy. But I think this is a pretty easy topic. We're in the process of getting out all of the teacher, school psych contracts, the actual electronic personal contracts to everyone. And there was a lot of changes this year because of the change of the calendar. And so we had to do some adjustment to what our previous contract looked like. And so this is what it would look like. But there are, I guess what I'm going to suggest would be a change we would make. So I don't know if you guys have read your contracts recently or looked in detail, but on line 3, historically we have listed what's in red plus 1 full school improvement day. And that typically was like a May date, if you remember. There was a May PD day or a May day that we did kindergarten testing and some other pieces. And honestly, I don't know why why it was that one day, because there's other PD days throughout the year too. So in talking with Dr. Hubbard, there really isn't that day now. And so the initial plan was just to kind of pull that off and then to readjust the days on 4B. But then as I started reading deeper into 4B, right there, you can see that, teachers would work 187. That's not in dispute. And then the calculations that are done behind the scenes through technology are that 178 is the number minus whatever's up on 3. Okay, so right now it's 9 days of pre-service plus the 178 will get you to your 187, right? So that's good. But if you look at the language, I don't think it matches what actually happens. So currently the language reads, 178 days of which shall be while school is actually in session. Well, we don't have 178 days of school actually in session. It's 172, I think. A minimum of 9 days, which shall be devoted to professional activities as directed by the superintendent of the district. Well, again, the 9 days here simply reference the pre-service days or the orientation days, while there's other PD days in the calendar, things like that. So bringing this to this group, because we wanted some feedback on, I guess what I'm initially recommending would be to change the language in 4B to reflect actually what's happening now. So the suggested change would be a maximum of 178 days, which follow the approved district calendar. That's in the margin, which follow the district calendar. A minimum of 9 days, which shall be orientation days as noted above. And just simplify it and have it reflect the 9 orientation days plus the school calendar that's approved.
Is everyone following that?
Yeah, I just. Processing, yeah. There's other ways to do it too. I mean, the big piece is the 187, right? So that's the big number. It's just how these other two are reflected in the language.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Isn't this addressed in the P&A?
It is, yeah.
So
Yeah, do you have a page number on that people can compare that to or look at that?
I always just thought it was weird that we have.
And Jay, you're a little quiet. I can't hear you.
Is your mic on, Jay?
Hello.
Yeah, that's
There
better.
we go. All right. Yeah, my mic wasn't on. If it's, to me, if it's addressed in the P&A, I don't see why it's almost kind of like how SPED was, where it's hit multiple places. I think if it's just addressing and referencing back to what we have in the P&A, then we're not worried about going forward and having two separate things.
So the whole purpose of 4B, if I'm right, is to address adjustment to compensation in the event the contract is terminated. So do we need anything other than saying that it's 187 days and that the compensation is 187th of the, if that's the only information we need there, because
Yes.
the P&A is incorporated, like the terms are incorporated into this contract. But this isn't mandatorily negotiable. We can't change this unless we have your agreement. The form of the contract's mandatorily negotiable.
I mean, to me, I think if we're changing something, it's better to simplify it and have it reference,
Negotiated agreement,
yeah.
yeah.
Because if we go in and we say, the 178 and then a minimum of 9 days, we'll be revisiting this, I'm assuming.
Every year.
Every year.
Right.
Where if the point of the bullet is, like Rachel said, that it's just, you work for 187 days, and this is kind of the rate, the daily rate. The middle part maybe isn't,
Just take out the
Necessary.
phrase "a maximum of" all the way through
until in the
in
event.
the event.
Yeah, that's,
Now, I'm gonna throw a curveball here. Is that reflective of a new teacher?
yeah, so it reads the same way. So there's a 190-day contract, and it reads the same way. It's the only difference is instead of 9, this year it reads 12 days, because they have the 3
Okay.
new teacher.
So this is
Orientation
the
days, yeah.
continuous teacher version?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
exactly, yep. So it would say 190, and then 13, or 12, and then 178,
Okay.
yep.
So if we take out that phrase, do we need to do anything to paragraph 3 to simplify it? Do we even need to say the contract includes 9 full orientation days? Or is
I
that,
questioned that too. I mean, that would be my hope, because again, like Lindsay referenced, we in HR have to look at the calendar, adjust this, work with IT to get it to match, and it's like, can we just reference the school calendar in the negotiated agreement, and the total number of days worked? That would be the cleanest in my opinion, but again,
Because between the P&A and just the calendar that we get, that covers what those dates would be. I don't know that it needs to be in this form as well.
So orientation normally, that terminology normally refers to the first days, the first 4 days typically, and then the rest of the year, those are referred to as professional development days.
Right.
So if I'm reading that, my first thought was, oh, are we, and I know this is this year's contract, but, and this year we did have 9 orientation days. But if it's gonna, if you're talking about what you want to do moving forward, remember, or not, those are probably going to be eventually at some point reverted back to
Right.
professional development days throughout the year.
Um,
I don't know if that makes a difference, but just that word orientation has in the P&A is used at the point to refer to those initial 4 days. And otherwise, they're referred to as PD days when it comes to blockout days and such.
Yeah, because that part 3 is only talking about orientation.
I guess from like a just contract standpoint that we're signing this, on 3, how important is it to include that it says contract includes 9 full days orientation?
I don't think we need that at all.
I mean,
Yeah.
it shows up other places.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna reference anything, I would say orientation duties as described in the P&A. You know, that type of thing, but that's almost more than,
and perhaps a reference to the approved calendar.
yeah.
So do we want to do this? Because I want to make sure we have time for all those who have set aside their
Sure,
afternoon to
yeah.
join us. Can we maybe, if you guys agree, because I think this is a little time sensitive, right? Because you need to issue these.
We want to get these out quickly, yeah.
Can we send you guys a new red line version that deletes out this language that we see as unnecessary? And look at that last sentence in paragraph 3 and think if we maybe just take it out or put in language, because I think this already has, yeah, it already incorporates the P&A in paragraph 2. So we'll look at that and then send it to you guys, and can we do a thumbs up via email or have Jill say we've looked at it and we're all comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, good,
No, I understand.
we'll do that after,
okay.
we'll do
Thanks,
that
guys.
hopefully tomorrow.
Yep, appreciate the conversation, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then, folks, Jill, do you want to talk about, I think you had initiated an email to Rachel, letting her know, a little bit about the folks that want to come on and talk. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you see the structure happening before I admit folks?
Yeah, sure. I know that last week they had the board meeting and the announcement that there's going to be a transition time for elementary transitioning, I think around the week of September 29th. And I know that into hybrid, and I know that brought up tons of questions, tons of concerns. People's schedules could be changed, people could be moved, things like that. So I know Rachel reached out to me via email and said that they would appreciate at this meeting to hear from a representative group of elementary teachers from across the district to find out kind of like their needs, their concerns, and how we can like minimize the amount of I guess change or disruption or things like that that's happening with the plan going forward that they were going to move into hybrid. So we just kind of as a team and with Alinda's input as well, reached out to some teachers that we know have talked with us a little bit before about concerns and things like that. So I think we had 6 of them. When you said 9, I was like,
Yes, no, there's 9 of you, all 6 of them. You're right, Jill.
okay. So they're just they're in the waiting room.
So, in terms of process, if I admit them, do you and Dr. Hubbard want to welcome them and facilitate them getting the info out that they want to share? I'm assuming that Lindsay and Rachel are going to be the note takers that they always are, so you can capture things that come up to be able to to take on any discussion or action you want after you're done hearing from them. So if I admit them, I think it makes sense for Jill and Dr. Hubbard, you guys want to just tag team the welcome of them and get the information from them. And then, let me know when we wrap that up and we'll move on.
Yeah. It
In
might be
terms
helpful
of just back
too,
to the
maybe
committee.
if we give some, maybe like an updated explanation of where we are in the process for both the transition of all in-person teachers to hybrid, and then also where we are in terms of processing those who will have to have some sort of reassignment and what that's looking like, just so that those teachers have that information before, so that they can comment on that as well as whatever, additional information.
So then let's go ahead and get them in.
Yeah.
And then.
Okay, so then Dr. Hubbard, I'm assuming, would start with the update on it, and then,
Or Dr. Sheen, either one.
okay, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and admit all guys, and then, I won't be facilitating this piece, so I'm gonna go on mute and I'll be here. And everyone is starting to fall in now, so. There you go.
All right. Welcome. I can't tell yet if you guys have your volume working and everything like that.
I see 4. I don't see, it doesn't look like they have their videos on, which they don't have to, but it might be good to see them when they speak. Oh, there we go.
There's Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Awesome.
Hi, Angela.
Hi there.
Hi, Amber.
So we have, yep.
Well, I'll kick us off and go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to welcome you all to join us, and really, more importantly, say thank you for taking the time to join us. We have all been through a lot of transition this year, and so I know we recognize that that's difficult for everyone, and so we wanted to lay out a conversation today about this transition for elementary and what that's going to look like. And I'm going to let Michael talk more about the specifics of the transition, but we are looking for some feedback from you all today, both anxiety, the angst that's coming, that I know that lots of people are feeling right now. And I would just tell you, we feel that too. Please understand that. This isn't easy for any of us, and none of us have friends we can call and say, how are you doing this? Because none of us have ever done any of this. So we're trying to make the best of it along with you all. And so we just thought today a conversation would be a great place to start. So Michael, do you want to add anything to that?
Just to reiterate what you just said, just to thank you and an appreciation for everyone's understanding and grace as we go through this process. Certainly not something that we have ever done, and we're doing the best we can. And we want feedback so that we're not missing anything. So again, guys, thanks for being here.
Yeah, and the feedback to specifically how we can partner to have the smoothest transition possible, partner to address specific concerns of our elementary staff, all those types of stuff. That's what we want to hear and see if we can problem solve.
So I'm going to start with just some basic numbers. We had roughly about 1,400 requests to change. We did have some duplicates in those numbers, and we're working through all those and should have those pretty solid by tomorrow morning. It took a lot of data entry, and so we're very appreciative of Debbie from Rushton Elementary, who's been here working her tail off, and she's been absolutely awesome. So we're thankful for her help in that process. So if we just did simple math in the numbers, it would mean that roughly 50 some teachers would have to change, mostly from remote to in-person, but maybe a couple the other direction. But we don't believe it will be that high. We don't know what the numbers are yet. We should really in the next 48 hours. We're going to be working on what that looks like, but we're really hopeful that it's not nearly that high. And the reason that is because a lot of our buildings, the majority actually, had extremely small class sizes in person. And so there were a lot of seats available for in-person instruction. And so some of those kids, you know, if you only had 2 kids per grade level at, I'm making this number up, but 6th grade at Brookridge, then they easily fall into the 6th grade. And so a lot of those numbers worked for us. We still don't know all of them, but as we're looking at them, we're pleasantly surprised at what that might look like. And we're hoping for as few grade level changes as possible. I can't guarantee that someone's not going to have to change a grade level. I mean, I think that is a possibility. I'm going to be very upfront about that. But we're going to keep those as minimal as possible. We recognize that that's extremely difficult. And so we want to keep that as minimal as possible. Mike, you want to add anything?
Yeah, just maybe, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on the timeline because it hasn't been published, and we certainly want your feedback before we finalize any of these plans. But just to work backwards, you know, the deadline that we're working on is October 5th. That's the published date in which we told our community that students would start their new schedule. So a lot of work has been done with multiple teams from a technical standpoint, from a practical standpoint, from the C&I team to HR and so on what steps need to be taken to ensure a seamless transition on October 5th for everyone, for kids, for teachers, and so on. So one of the biggest concerns, of course, is that week of transition of September 28th. We want to ensure that staff and families know what October 5th is going to look like for them during that week, but we also want to make sure that week can be effective. And so we can't touch Skyward, we can't touch Canvas during that week, and so that was one of the big hurdles to get over. So again, not to give specific deadlines, but there's going to have to be one solid standard date across the district in which we do a mass edit to our data. That we think will ensure. Yep.
It's coming back.
Timeout.
I was on a roll too. Yep.
This is the kind of seamless transition we're talking about. So sorry. Oh, I'm on mute.
Is everyone back? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, cool. So not sure where you cut off, but we want to ensure a seamless transition that week of September 28th. And so that's, I think, one of the big focuses that we want to have with you guys on what thoughts, what concerns you have during that week. To kind of skip to this week, we're going to be asking principals to start to build sections. We know who the kids are. We know. Sorry, some technical.
Good.
We know who the kids are. We know where they're going to go. And so principals can start to build those sections and rosters so that we're ready to give a mass communication out to families and to teachers, again, in a reasonable timeline. So those are kind of broad strokes. So I don't know if that's enough information at this point to kind of start a conversation, but without getting too deep into the timeline, I think that's the gist of it.
And does everybody understand that there would not be these kinds of staffing changes that semester? So this would be one time for our elementary staff, correct?
Yes, I mean, I think we said that onesie, twosies, if there's space, we would allow for that, but yeah.
There will not be staffing changes.
Okay, no staffing changes, but parents are still able to change their choice.
Correct.
Specifically says based on availability. So if there's space in their home school, then they would be able to make that choice. If they still wanted to make the choice and go to a different elementary school where there was space, that also would be an option. But it specifically said based on availability.
And I think that was probably what a lot of people's concern was, if we have so many kids who are coming back remote to in-person, is it going to, overload an in-person classroom.
We would still maintain our cap, so we wouldn't allow, again, similar to the transfer process, if we wouldn't allow a transfer to let a classroom go over 27 or over 24, and in this, it would be the same in this case.
Okay.
And maybe one last thing to kind of spur the conversation, Kevin Hansford is working on the numbers right now. One of the things that he's trying to do is think creatively on ways in which we can minimize changes to staff, changes to kids. And so, do we explore large class aids? Do we explore other creative options so that, if a class is, if these kids coming back at a particular elementary put them above the cap, can we work with that staff member, with that principal, and agree to a large class aid rather than splitting, moving another teacher, that type of thing. So he's trying to be creative and kind of helping frame conversations with principals. But again, I think that's what this forum would be for too, is to get some feedback on teachers' thoughts around that.
Can you clarify when you say large class aid, do you mean like a stipend? Is that what you're, or do you mean like an aide, like someone that comes and helps?
Be another person, yeah, an aide. In that
Sorry.
room.
Thanks.
Yeah.
No, good
And-
question.
Yeah.
It is a good question. And Jill, we do that now in some cases where a sixth grade group of 3 might go over by 1 kid, then we would put a large class aid.
But how does that, I just can't wrap my head around that and keeping distancing.
I think that's going to be difficult with distance. I agree with you.
Yep.
And the 3 feet.
So one of our first kind of things we were thinking about asking was what would that week of the 29th transition week look like? Like, would they all still be teaching a class all day? Is there, what does it kind of entail with having to switch either a room, switch a building, switch a level? Do we have like built-in days that there's more time for that?
Yeah, so again, I think that what this forum is for, what kind of supports would teachers feel like they would need? We have some ideas, but I would be interested in what folks' thoughts are on what kind of supports they would need or want.
Okay, sure, yeah, and
Yeah.
I think I can just kind of open it up and let some of our elementary teachers answer that. So
Yeah.
I'll mute.
And I would be open-minded in regards to compensation versus subs also. Like, would you have a preference and what's that look like?
And I'll throw in there as an option of like classified help if it's available.
Like to physically move? We'll,
Yeah, that's-
that's a given. We're going to support that, for
Okay.
sure.
Did everybody hear that? So if someone has to physically move into a classroom,
Just their stuff.
Yeah, I
then there
mean,
will
if-
be help.
Right.
Anything, and yeah, pretty much anything.
Is there any one of our guests who want to maybe just chime in and start talking?
I would ask as you chime in, I know maybe 2 or 3 of you, but some of you I have never met. So if you would introduce yourself and tell us where you are in your grade level, that would be very helpful for me.
Who's drawing the short straw?
I'll chime in. I will go first. My name is Amber Pagan, and I am here representing. So, some of our biggest concerns are a pre-K room takes a lot to move. Like just this year, I had to move at the end of the year during the whole COVID thing and getting into the building, and it was like such a limited amount of time we could be in the building that it already took me like almost 2 weeks to move my stuff because it was such a limited amount of time. And then once it all got here, then it sat here. Obviously, over the whole summer, when I came back to unpack it, some of my boxes were missing. I had to track boxes down. Some of the shelves on my rolling furniture were gone. So it's kind of, in this case, maybe it'd be easier to find. But first of all, the packing takes a long time. Second of all, we just wanted to make sure that all of us, if we're in pre-K, that we're all having an equal amount of students in each of our levels, especially because in pre-K, we kind of do spread the kids over to make the different sections. And a lot of us are kind of struggling too with having an in-person section and a remote section, because it is like, you're already doing so much work as a pre-K teacher when you were already in person full day, that having to change everything to be very user-friendly for really littles, and then explaining that to their parents, it's a lot of extra stuff. For sure. And it would be just having to do in person and then thinking about doing that remote as well. Since we're already spending so much time during remote, like making stuff user friendly, when would we have that time to prepare? And so some thoughts that came from the other teachers was maybe like having every other Friday as a plan day, like we would plan, hey, we're going to do these activities for the students, but then the teachers would have time to plan if they're both an in-person and a remote teacher having that. And then as far as like the moving, they just were also just saying a couple days like up front to plan if we were going to have to switch sections or switch schools. And also just they getting some help. And I think that they had said compensation. They'd like compensation were my thoughts for pre-K.
Can I go back to the aid comment just for a second? Mike and Michelle, it's Laura Holland, I'm kindergarten deamer. Last year, we were over the cap in both of our sections of kindergarten. At the time, we only had 2. My question is, when you're talking about aides, we shared an aide between both classes, and it was really hard. You know, Amber talked about the struggles of pre-K. Kindergarten's pretty much the same because a lot of our students now are not going to pre-K before or school. And with the number of behaviors that we had in special circumstances last year, sharing an aide between 2 sections was difficult. So when you talk about large class size aides, are you thinking sharing one between a grade level, or are you thinking specific rooms that actually are over the cap, getting an aide for that particular class?
Laura, I don't know that we've talked specifics, so I think the feedback is great. I've written it down. So what I hear you saying is if it's going to be an aide, there needs to be one for each classroom.
Yeah, I think it just gets hard because they're not, you know, they might be out of your room for an hour. Well, then for that hour, whatever classes you're teaching, you still have 27 kids. And so when I had 27 last year, it was like whack-a-mole, you know, trying to get them to sit down and pay attention and do whatever. And as soon as you got one table set, then you had to go run to another table. And that was just my suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So far, time to plan, compensation, if we have an aide, it needs to be a full-time aide. Okay, I'm just trying to keep track of, okay.
So I would just reiterate what Dr. Hubbard said too. Subs, you know, plan time, that's all on the table, as is compensation. I think we can absolutely provide subs. I think given the nature of where we're at in the pandemic, it might be safer to go down the compensation road, a little more guaranteed. But again, everything's on the table, and it really could be, in my opinion, individualized. You know, if someone wanted to talk about subs and someone wanted to talk about compensation, that seems like a reasonable approach to me.
Because you think because of the number, since it's gonna be lower than 50 at least,
Yeah,
that we could maybe provide options for
I think it's something to talk about, for sure.
the elementary teachers that are with us? Do you think that that people would appreciate like individualized support options? Or is there like a one size fits all?
If I could interject here, my name is Angela Connor, and I'm an elementary specialist. So when we're talking about aides and we're talking about substitutes, I would also like to know the plan for how we use that when we have our situation for PE, our music, etc. Just to give a little bit of backstory, because for me, it's not the finances that are going to be a compensation. I'm more concerned about the safety and how we can do this in the safest route. When I first received my, and let me know, by the way, if my video is going off, because we're in the basement here. So just tell me if there's any issues.
You're good.
Okay. So when I first received our original gating criteria, I was concerned and I freaked out, and my initial reaction was to just quit. But I was really appreciative of how Dr. Fulton kept going back to that we're going to follow science. So I decided to do the same thing, and I took that gating criteria to my doctor to ask her opinion before school started, as soon as we found out. And my doctor's a hematologist because I'm a stroke survivor. So she's been seeing me since then for the last 12 years. And she said that her kids are going to stay remote for the year. She thinks that it's reasonable that I would consider finding other employment, because we are trying to keep these cohorts together, but then as specialists, we are going to see all of them, and not only those kids, but those adults in the room that have been in there all day. So I really like the idea of having all of these paras that would stay in one cohort. And I know that it's outside of the box, but so is this pandemic. And if there's any way that we could consider having subs or having paras that can be in the classroom and having some specials for at least those of us who will otherwise have to leave, if we could have our WebEx and our Canvas still used in those classrooms in some situations. And there's going to be times when teachers have to isolate or quarantine. And it's a lot safer, in my opinion, to have those kids with a para that they already know, or an extra sub, even if we're using, I don't know what we're doing with student teaching this year. If we're having vetted and reliable volunteers who have already passed our criteria, I just think that it would help, to be very blunt, save some jobs here of some of our specialists who just can't see 400 kids this year. And going back to that science, I don't believe in just finding one opinion to validate how I already feel. So I did take it to a family doctor who's also seen me for several years. And she was very supportive of taking a leave of absence, which I'm fine with and I'm at peace with. It's no one's fault for this pandemic, but not every teacher is in that situation. So I know some people are upset and want compensation, but for some people, that compensation they're willing to sacrifice for safety.
Thank you for that perspective. I do think something we haven't mentioned that might be worthwhile is when we have to go through and do reassignments, we will absolutely consider the information we have from an individual staff member in terms of preference, but also medical conditions.
100%. So as I've been working with Kevin, and when we start working with our building principals, any of those ADAs that have been submitted, any of the prior requests that were done in June or July, whenever he did that, I'm sorry, those will be considered, and we will try to meet any of those preferences that we possibly can. The good news was, because of the initial numbers, we had to move people into remote positions who didn't actually prefer it. So I think there's going to be some wins here, is the hope, is that we can move some people out of remote who didn't initially want to be remote into in-person. So I'm not saying it's not going to sting. It certainly is. But I think there can be some wins too, where we can get some people back in positions that they would prefer.
But just to be blunt, of our specialists going to be exempt from being virtual again? Or, I mean,
well,
that's
I mean,
kind of how that last round was.
You're right. There was a difference of approach with that particular work group. I'm might need some clarification. I mean, at this point, we're moving forward with all staff, at least all elementary, being hybrid, and so essentially everyone's going to be in that same boat, right? So, yeah, to that extent, I mean, specialists and gen ed teachers are all going to be.
Unless they have a specific ADA.
Well, and again, and you know, all of those ADAs are specific for us, one person, one ailment, one job description, all of those different things. But for the most part, our positions as teachers, and when we go back to school, is in person. So our kids are there. That's where we need to be. So there's other options that we can explore from an HR perspective, but the ADA works through the accommodations that we can do to keep them safe while in that in-person environment.
It's tough, and there are good protections under the P&A in terms of leaves of absence for those who have to make that really tough decision. And we're aware of them, and we're talking through staff members with them if they want to lay out, okay, what's all of my options? So I know HR is trying to have those discussions and make sure people can make as informed decisions as possible. Okay. Anyone we haven't heard from that wants to give feedback on good ways to do this, supports to provide?
I'm sorry, can I speak now? I don't have video, but can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm not sure if my thing is working here. Okay, I'm Karen Mathis, and I'm an elementary specialist. I think elementary specialists really need to be heard because we will be seeing the most students of all the elementary staff. And I know that the district thinks that they have made safety precautions for us by letting us see the same cohorts for a week. But I think the people that are making some of these decisions don't understand how many students we come in contact with through the day, especially if you consider our duties before and after school. So to me, it shouldn't have to be, it just seems like there can be some middle ground between us seeing so many students or just taking an ADA or a leave of absence. It just seems like we could have a middle ground where somehow we could keep our specialists safe, because I know a lot of people do have some health concerns, and I'll just say my health concern. When I first heard this whole coming back to school, I wrote to HR very quickly, and I just said I have some health concerns. You can't see my video. I don't know why it's not working, but I will say this: I am old enough in the district. I'm an old enough teacher that when Jay Sharbutt was in Shawnee Mission Northwest as a student, I was a teacher there. I went to Flint Elementary. I mean, I don't know if any of this means anything to you. I went to Knollwood. So I've been in the district forever. And it just seems like there should, if we want to keep our good teachers in our district, I just don't see any accommodations for our teachers. And I don't know, maybe I don't know. I'm just saying that the specialists are very important to how the public sees a school. Oftentimes, elementary students say the reason why they come to school is for that PE teacher, or they come to school for that music teacher. We are the face of the school sometimes. I am worried because in my elementary specialist, which is art, we've probably had 10 art teachers leave in 2 years. That is I don't know if people understand that. We have had many teachers leave for many reasons. And I just think, when we lose a good teacher, they can be replaced, but they can be replaced by a body. And there's a difference between somebody who's mature and knows their material and has been well trained and a body. And it just seems like, I think we need to start having these discussions with our elementary specialists about what we can do to retain them and what we can do to keep our good people. And my last thing is, I know we, at least I'll speak for myself, would gladly give up our budgets, would gladly use PTA funds to have that extra support and get creative with the things that I'm not able to let kids use music anyway this year. So as far as actual physical copies, so there's no reason for me to not see funds like that go towards having actual bodies so that we can all be safe.
Thank you guys both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Tammy, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm Tammy Matheson, and I'm a remote teacher. So I've opted to be that remote body. And I know that if I were asked to transition and change to an in-person teacher, maybe in my building, maybe at a different grade level, maybe in another building, I would definitely need the things that were mentioned earlier. The physical help of moving. I would definitely need the time or the compensation for setting up a room. When you mention subs, that, I don't know, it confuses me because it's twice as much work to plan for a sub to cover your class while you're doing something else. So yeah, and that's my perspective. I think it's a fairly commonly held perspective, but so the idea of individual choice of compensation or time or whatever might be a good idea. That would be really disruptive if I were in here packing up my room. I mean, I guess a remote sub could teach from somewhere else. I know a very big concern across the district in elementary schools is furniture. We don't, especially the older grades, we don't have individual desks. We are, whether it's an old building like we're in or the newer buildings, it's all tables. It's all collaborative groups. For us to physically distance at 6 feet, we need desks. Our custodians have inventoried every single desk, every single small individual old computer tables that they have, and there's not enough. There's not enough space to physically distance at 6 feet. Those are our main concerns. If I had to switch grade levels, probably some budgetary money to get supplies for in-person at a different grade level as well.
Hey, Tammy, would it, because you brought up, I just had this idea. You brought up the sub, and it's hard because you're teaching anyways, but what if the sub was there and you kept on teaching, but you could be like, hey, I need you to pack up this stuff?
I mean, that would work. That could be a possibility, or other classified people who might have that time available.
You know, going back to your furniture comment that you said, you know, it concerns me if I'm going to have a full class of 27 with the same type of furniture that you mentioned, because I have tables in my room with 6th graders, you know, that the rooms aren't big enough to have an overloaded class. You know, even then having an aide in there on top of it, that's even more space that it's going to be really tight.
Yeah, if I stripped everything out of my room, bookcases, everything, I still could not fit my 27 that I have on my roster.
One other thing, I mean, I think we have some more things to discuss, but another one we've gotten a lot is when it is hybrid, the expectation during hybrid is that while you're in person with group A, that you're also live WebExing with group B. At the high school level, we've been told that we need to focus with our in-person students and give them our attention, the group A kids, because that's their in-person day, and that the group B students would have some other assignment or something they were doing that day at home, so that we wouldn't try to connect online and in person at the same time. So I know a lot of people are asking about that.
For right now, our hybrid will only be a couple of weeks, and I would be remiss to say this, but if I didn't say it, I mean, I think hybrid has to be the most difficult way to teach ever, right? We all recognize that. And I've thought about it in my own mind, how I would do that. And I think it's really difficult to tell a kindergartner on their hybrid day, especially if it's a kindergartner that doesn't have a lot of support at home. I mean, Laura, I'm sure this like keeps you up at night. I get it. But at the same time, I do think managing two groups of kids at the same time is very difficult. So I want to recognize that up front. I think that not connecting with those kids all day long is not, I don't think that's acceptable. Do you have to do it at the same time? No, I don't. As a matter of fact, I would avoid doing it at the same time as I've thought about how I might do this. But so I might direct instruction here and then send them to independent practice or into small groups or Khan Academy or whatever that may be in my classroom, and then try to connect with my hybrid kids at home during that time. I do think it's going to be creative. And when we say this is the art of teaching, I think is when it really, I mean, hybrid is the best place to practice that. I try to look at it from a positive aspect. Nobody says it's going to be easy. I know BLTs are talking about this, and quite frankly, you guys are much better at that than I am. I'm not going to try to sit here and say that I have the answers because I don't. But I do think teams in PLCs have come up with great solutions to support each other and help each other. I've listened to a couple BLT meetings that have been amazing. I've seen products that have come out of BLT meetings that are really quite amazing. So hybrid's going to be tough. And I think that we're all going to have patience and grace during hybrid, including our building principals. They understand that. Our building leadership teams understand that. So, and I think, you know, in addition to, we just really feel like kids need to be in school, that's our quick transition to get all kids in, because we do believe hybrid is going to be extremely difficult.
I want to hit another thing that popped in my head of teachers that I don't want them to be limited on the time that they have because the building's closed because the principal's not available.
I think we're back to normal building hours, that the building is open on normal building hours. So, but is that 11 at night? I think it's 11, but I can double check that.
High school teacher telling, I don't know what the hours are. I just know it was concerned that people were trying to do stuff before, but the building was closed.
I know in the spring that was absolutely the case. My understanding is we're back to normal building hours, but I'll confirm and get that to you.
Okay, and then I think it's helpful, you know those giant carts that maintenance has that are wood, that have the shelves?
The library, yeah.
Yeah, I think if people know that they need to get those, so that way they're not boxing up everything, they can utilize those.
Jay, I really hope we're not moving a lot of buildings. I feel very optimistic about that. Now, I say that, and the handful of people that do have to move are going to be like, Michelle, you said not very many, and when you're one of them, I understand that's going to feel like I'm the one, right? But I really am pretty optimistic we're not going to move a lot of teachers from buildings.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I really
That's what I do, like Jay was saying. Those rolling carts, having moved both ways with the carts and with individual boxes, the rolling carts make it a much easier process.
I think even just moving room to room.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can speak now. I think we also need to put some time into thinking about the impact this will have on SPED. Right now, SPED teachers across the district are working their tails off. Everybody's working their tails off. Navigating everybody's plans, because everybody's plans are different. And we really need paras, and I know that takes paras applying, but especially once we bring kids in, SPED is trying to really cohort groups, and paras stay within groups, but to meet minutes, those cohorts get bigger and bigger, which presents a major safety concern. And then that leads into teachers trying to meet minutes, and we're not meeting minutes, and that creates difficulty for all of our sped teachers because we feel like this is what our kids need, and if we've written it in the IEP that this is what our kids need, then that's what we believe they need. And I think just across the district, especially with elementary, there's a lot of things that people use this spring. You know, we were very fortunate to be able to have all these different resources online that had free subscription trials. And now we've gotten used to using them, and they're not available. And so that might be something just district-wide we need to consider if there's some subscriptions. I know people use Nearpod a lot, Boom Learning, which is like flashcard, interactive games, different things like that, that having subscriptions to those type of things would be really helpful for SPED and just elementary in general.
So I don't disagree. I know Sherry Dumoulin has been instrumental in the staffing piece and working with our SPED staff and making sure that all the student needs are being served. And she is, again, working with our team and Kevin in this transition.
Right.
I do not disagree that we need more para support. Just had a meeting with my counterpart, Michelle Morris, and she is, the board approved some extended funds for hard-to-fill positions, and so she is exploring with the business office and ways in which we can incentivize some staff to apply for those positions, because right now we are down, and we need to find a way to get them in.
Okay, so we have 45 minutes left.
Shannon Johnston was one of our people, and she keeps getting dropped off.
Oh, no.
She's gonna attempt to call in.
Yes,
That's her, green.
Shannon, is that you?
0276?
No, she's the green.
Yeah, that's me. I finally got on again.
So sorry.
That's okay. It just kept kicking me off.
Go ahead.
Oh, please, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Is it my turn to
Yep.
say something?
Yes.
We'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Okay. What I did is I spoke with a teacher in our building today. She's been in our building for 8 years, and last year she was 3rd grade. At the end of the school year, she was told that she was going to have to teach 2nd grade, and she's the type of teacher that she prepped all summer for 2nd. On August 21st, she was told again that she was going to have to go to 3rd and be remote, and this wasn't a choice, and she's teaching kids at East Antioch. And she did not choose to be a remote teacher. Like right now, she's in no man's land, she feels like, with 5 principals and 3 school emails, and she doesn't feel like she fits anywhere. So I think that how she's feeling right now is how some teachers are going to feel when we have to start moving some people around. And that's like, I'm sorry, I've missed so many things that were said. I'm not really sure if what I'm saying, has already been said before, but I've watched the stress that has been on her this year, being based at Brookridge, but teaching East Antioch kids. I do know, I was looking today, we have, we were talking about numbers of students. At least in our building, we have four classrooms that could be used. We have four classrooms that just have things kind of like stored in them. But the one thing that we really are going to have to watch is the mental health, the physical health, the what it's doing with our family. I know that the one teacher that I did get to hear a little bit was like the physical part, and then also the suggestion of writing the lesson plans. And we've been told that our lesson plans now have to be electronic through Canvas, and the stress of having to do that. And then if you're even in the room and there's a sub, and then you're trying to pack, the children are still going to want direction from their teacher. I personally, I think that would stress me out even more if I was in the room and somebody was trying to teach, like a sub that came in. So those are just some thoughts, especially the one that I got from, the teacher that's here. And I mean, right now she doesn't know what's going to happen when we go hybrid. If she's going to be here, if she's still going to be remote. I mean, it's really weighing hard on her.
I think to piggyback on that, I think it does go back to your, of like individual and the expectation that principals are going to need to meet with the staff members and really come up with a plan to see how we can hit their needs.
Yeah.
And I think to kind of piggyback off Shannon talking about teachers feeling disconnected in that emotional piece, this transition week is going to mean for teachers, these kids that we've been developing relationships with for a month, we're severing those ties and potentially building new relationships, or, that's going to change. And so I think some considerations into who's notifying families, because I know even just for me personally, calling families and saying, I'm not going to be your teacher anymore, that's a lot of emotional for me. And then how do we support teachers through that as we're supporting kids? That's going to take a toll on people.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because we've had some conversations around that, and we've also had some conversations around, as a teacher that potentially has a whole new class, right? Or maybe a partial new class, what do I need from the teacher that's had them the last 4 or 5 weeks? So that is one thing I definitely would love some input from you all, is if you're going to be gaining new kids, which even teachers that aren't changing from remote to in-person or vice versa, or even changing grade levels, likely will still have new kids depending on how it falls out. So as a teacher, what would you like to see from their teacher the last 5 weeks? What would be helpful?
And that's a hard one too, because that's a double-edged sword. Get somebody's opinion of, sometimes it's hard when you get a preconceived of how somebody is, and they may be completely different. So that's a hard ask.
And there's the potential of, families maybe moved from one, from remote to in-person because remote just really wasn't working for them. And so the perception you might develop of a student based on remote, when things just
skewed.
were not working, and then in person they may thrive, or the vice versa,
Well, and I was thinking even too, like, if Jay had given an interest inventory that told me that Rachel has siblings and Rachel loves dogs, or whatever the case may be, right? Like, that would be really nice for me to have and not ask the family to repeat. So I was thinking about things like that too. I mean, we all do those get to know your kid activities in those first few weeks, and we want that to happen. So what would be a great way to share that information? We talked about sort of a one-page Google form that I might be able to complete. We want it to be easy. We don't want it to be a lot of work, but on the flip side of it, it would be nice to have something coming in, I feel like.
Yeah, I think if a teacher has done that and has, because I know some teachers at the beginning started with a Google form of get to know you, of how to share that with
The new
teachers, that would be great. Or because I also think too, it's going to be hard in all this. I know that Canvas has the resources, and I don't know if there's way to reach out to some teachers that aren't being affected by this switch, and having them maybe ask them or compensate them to produce some extra stuff, so that the teachers that are being and having to do this all have some extra resources to pull in.
If there was a way to develop in Commons, some sort of you're brand new to pre-K, you're brand new to kindergarten, this is what you're gonna need to get started, because, everyone's devoted time to having their Canvas, but I'm especially thinking if you made a bigger grade level jump, redoing Canvas again would be a lot, and You know, it may not look exactly the way we want it to look, but if it had curriculum
Built in it already.
resources built into it already,
Well, yeah.
that would be helpful.
I taught sixth grade for 5 years. Now I'm going to third. And the third grade's like, well, I did these things. They didn't work.
Yeah.
These work better, you know?
Right.
And I think just another consideration, do we have enough teacher manuals for grade level switches? You know, we're gonna have to be trading those around, and is that trade going to be done quickly? Because if I know that I'm gonna have kids in building on October 5th, my manual I'm needing as soon as possible, yeah. So that's something it's gonna take a lot of logistics to get manuals traded around. The teacher book.
Back to the part of, getting to know the students, Google document, all of that stuff, that's fine and great. But if there was just time where, like today, I just took my class list from last year, went down and talked to our innovative specialist, and it took maybe 10 minutes to go a little scenario about each kid. And I think person to person or on the phone or FaceTime or something like that would work better for me than another email, another document, another something else, because we've gotten to know these students, and, and if I'm having to lose some of my children to somebody else, I would rather, be able to speak with their teacher and just say, this is what I noticed. So if there was time, built into this movement, and then also I'm not sure if you guys have talked about furniture. It's like there are quite a few teachers in our building who have tables, and that's going to be very hard to social distance. And so I think that I'm not sure in the warehouse if there are desks and things that can be moved around. Was that something that had been discussed?
Someone else had raised that.
Okay.
I wonder
Thank you,
also,
though.
at the high schools, how many are sitting? I know South has some, I know West has some.
I'm going to ask that question. I actually have that on my note to ask both the warehouse and buildings.
Because I know the high schools have had some furniture switches, and who knows?
I would like to stress, as far as the teachers getting to know their students, I think that, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be detailed out. The teachers are used to doing that, and I'm sure we can take care of it how they did the first time.
Okay, I think with our time, it'd be helpful to kind of get into some concrete things. I think trying to tackle the big ones first, because this information is super valuable. It's going to help us as we plan, and some of it are just softer things that now we know about, and we need to make sure that we provide those supports. But just maybe kind of diving in on the big one about specifically supports for teachers who have to move and teachers who have to change grade levels. Hopefully there's very few cases where that is a both situation for one teacher, but I guess it could be possible. Does it make sense to start with teachers who have to move physically, maybe, and start there?
When you say the September 28th week, is that the week that teachers are going to find out?
No.
Or are we trying to get them earlier?
They would find out, and that's actually a topic, thank you. Next week is when we would hope to let teachers know if there was going to be a move.
Okay.
And so thank you. And so typically what we've done is we've provided, hey, we might move you, and then a couple days later, you're being moved. I would ask for the grace that given this situation, we just say, hey, John, we need to move you, and just so that we can speed up the timeline. And if we need to go through that process again, but it's going to be pretty black and white what we need, and so.
And even for teachers who are staying in the building, like our remote section is capped at 27. I've got 21, 22 on my list. you know, if I'm gonna be receiving some of them, you know, that might be good, especially if they're in my own building. You know, they can pop into my WebEx every once in a while.
Right.
Just to kind of, you know, start that transition a little bit,
Okay.
you know?
That's a good point.
If we have an idea, I mean, that way on August 5th, I don't get, oh, here's 6 more students for you. And, you know, I wasn't expecting them or knowing them or how many to predict. And
So again, the capital draft, capital deed, or everything else is first to notify the staff if they're going to be making any changes. That's priority number one. And then secondarily would be to communicate any of the roster changes and things like that as the second step. We kind of had that later in the week, but that's a point well taken. So I'm more than willing to work with the team and see if we can speed that up a little bit.
Mike?
And I think, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I know we need to consider, you know, if I need to move buildings, that's a lot of time, effort, energy, everything. If I need to change grade levels, that's a lot. But if I have an influx of 4 or 5 brand new students, like, that's a lot of prep involved as well. Like, it's definitely nowhere near as much as other things, but you think about when you have one new student who comes in suddenly and trying to get their supplies and, you know, everything labeled for them, if you're talking 4 or 5, that's going to be some action, that's going to be some effort involved as well.
Extra students is a tier 1 moving classroom.
Sure.
And then
Grade levels, is that really truly how you would see it?
I
Extra
think-
students, one level of burden. Moving physically, a second higher level of
'cause
burden.
when you're thinking about, when you're moving grade levels, typically you're moving classrooms because
Right,
it depends.
They're
you
in
know,
different
if-
grouping.
If you're in a hallway that's 4 and 5th,
yeah.
you know, and you're going, that's not that big a deal, they probably won't. But the question I have for you was, when you're telling people, hey, you're gonna get moved, will they be receiving information about placement at the same time? So it's
Yeah.
okay.
How do you guys feel about that?
I would hate to get, hey, you're gonna move, we'll let you know later.
You want to know where to
I
go.
wanna know,
Right.
like, I just want it. Tell me
Yes.
everything you can give me, tell me, you know.
That's kind of been
where
our
we're at, too.
conversation.
Yeah, the
like-
timeline is so accelerated, it's just, let's just cut to the chase and here's what we need to do.
And I know you guys are prepared for it, but I feel like I have to say it, being prepared for, like, the tears. Like, because if it was me, there would be hysterics, you know, like, that's, I think.
It's emotional.
Yeah, so I think that's
Well,
gonna
and
be
it's-
another piece, like, it's better to rip the Band-Aid off, but also in the process of ripping off the Band-Aid, it's gonna be hard for
It's
people.
compounded because of so much is held together by bubble gum already.
Yeah.
And I would say, as a person that's had to move buildings multiple times, like, maybe don't tell them during the day, like, it'd be nice to know, like, at the end of the day, because, like, multiple times I wanted to cry and I'd go to the bathroom and then I have to go back and keep teaching. So just knowing at the end of the day, not like meeting or on their lunch break, even just having a little time, because even though I feel like I've been pretty positive about it, it does kind of affect you a little, because you're like, I spent all this time building a culture with people at this building, and now I'm moving to another building. So I like to make the joke, a new year, a new school. So, literally, when I meet a new staff every year, I'm like, hey, it's Amber, new year, new school.
Oh.
I would also say, absolutely not on a Friday afternoon
Sure.
at 3.
Yeah, no.
Yes,
And
yeah.
I would think that more than anything, the receiving principal needs to be available. I mean, if that receiving principal can reach out
Right.
that within 24 hours, because your mind's going to be reeling and you're going to want answers to questions.
Yeah, all points well taken, and without overpromising, see, I want to say this, we remain really optimistic that there's going to be some pretty easy moves from remote 4th grade back to in-person at the building. So there's going to be some of that, but we're hopeful it's not going to be a lot.
I'm wondering too, and I don't know if it's impossible. I know it's a difficult grid, but once we have these incentives, if there's any way for volunteers of people who would be willing or interested in moving first before just deciding who's doing it.
Yeah, I think the initial thought would be to take those preference forms that were initially filled out, and the principals clearly know what people's preferences were, and then taking what the needs are, looking at the preferences. But I think that's a decent point, would be to have the principals kind of informally survey, what people's desires are at this point. I think there can be some value in that as well.
I would also say right now, because we are on live stream and I don't even know how many people are watching, but if you have an interest in moving, I mean, if you're remote and you're like, it's not working for me, I'm ready to go back to the building, you need to tell somebody that. Reach out to your principal, reach out, if you're not assigned to your home principal, reach out and tell somebody that. I tell principals that all the time. If you want to move, you need to be talking to me about that right now for next year, if you want to change middle school to high school or vice versa, talk to us about that. So, if you are a teacher listening and you would be a volunteer, you should tell somebody that right now. It might save a lot of tears for a lot of people. I want to go back to something John said, if I understood you correctly, John, that this whole notion of popping into WebEx. I just want to put this warning out there a little bit. That's going to be somewhat difficult to do, and it's going to be logistically something buildings are going to have to work through, because while you might know your new roster, you will not be able to see them in Canvas or Skyward until a moment in time. And that moment in time, I believe, is October 2nd.
Yep.
Because once we move, if I move them to your class, then I lose them as a teacher. And so it's going to be logistically extremely difficult to do that. I'm not saying it can't be done, because I think it could be done in regards to popping in, but it's not going to be as easy as saying, look at the Canvas course or look at this. And so that's going to take some problem solving and that's something buildings are going to have to do, because obviously you guys know each other much better than us trying to micromanage that. But I want to be clear about that, because that's something in this transition that is going to be extremely important for people to understand, is that you're not going to be able to see anything in those two systems until that moment in time.
How do grade books transfer? I'm thinking upper
That's
elementary.
what I was just going to ask. Normally, when we have students move from a building to a building, grades never transfer,
So grades, we're worried about grades, we're worried about assignments, not, maybe that I didn't even take a grade on, that still might be valuable for a teacher to have, right? So discussion boards maybe in Canvas, we've been using those. And the answer is, we're working on it. And I can't guarantee you everything is going to be completely smooth. Michael did come up with some great answer today. I was optimistic.
The ICT department was super excited. They felt like they had a solution. It hasn't been done en masse, and so that's it. That's the what if. There's a new button. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with a new button in Skyward, but they are confident that they can build a support document for teachers who are getting these new students on a step-by-step procedure, that when you get your new roster, if it's a new kid into that section, there'll be a new button. And when you hit this, miraculously,
Tammy, like if you
yeah.
can cross your
and-
fingers, seeing whatever
right.
it's going to take.
Right.
We're all doing that.
Right. So it's a work in progress. So again, without overpromising, there are some discussions in place.
We're hopeful.
Yep.
I don't know about you, but I got a headache now.
It's a lot.
I know.
It's a lot.
It just, thinking about it, I know how much I spend just in my room.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. I mean, we're having a positive conversation here, but at the end of the day, we're asking a lot right now. And so although we can again, be positive about it and have a plan in place. We also recognize the fact that this is a lot to ask of teachers, of kids, of everyone. So we really do value the feedback.
Here's a
think-
thought about compensation.
Oh, I was gonna say that too.
Thinking people are going to be teaching all day and then trying to pack, and if their colleagues want to help them pack, are you up for offering, hourly compensation to people that stay, 2-3 hours after school to help their colleague get moved?
We hadn't discussed that, just frankly. I think we're willing to have that discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also, as a side to that, is if you are the one getting moved, my thought process would be stipend-based, because nobody needs to keep track of hours on top of this.
That was our thinking too. Yep.
Okay.
It got really, and Russ isn't here, but he could explain why that's not a good idea. But basically, he said it's not a good idea for the person who's being moved, because they couldn't do anything during contract time. There's all these audit issues. So,
Well, and it's also just you want one more thing out of me
Right.
of
to document the hours.
to document the hours, because either way I'm going to put the hours in, because I have to make this work.
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe can we start making a list of the things that we know we can do and then things we need to talk about in terms of support? And again, I'm hopeful it'll be a small number of people, but it's going to be, again, and we're asking a lot for those who have to move physically, the supports that we can provide for those who have to move physically.
Do you want me to write it out?
Yes, that would be great.
I have some, I know this is really chicken scratch, but it all really makes sense to me.
Thank you, Lindsay. So I know I heard availability of things to move your stuff on, right? So making sure we have the big rolling carts or whatever equipment the teacher prefers to move their things. And then who, from a staffing perspective, would typically provide physical help? How do we see that happening?
So facilities does a lot for us.
Okay.
They would show up with the carts, they would
They'd
make the
actually
physical
physically move
move. They'd give you labels on how to label your boxes to get from point A to point B. So we would work with both Tyler and Judd on that move.
But they're not gonna pack for you, right? They're just gonna
Yeah,
move
you
your
gotta pack
stuff.
your personal stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it would be different, because I don't know if there's ways to utilize some of our paras, at the other levels.
I would suggest we talk to Tash with the SMAC board and see if we can't get some
PTA help?
Even if it's not in that particular building, just if we could rally, a large group of just volunteers that might be willing to help.
That's a great idea.
Boxes.
And then we talked about compensation, of course, sub-support, and then additional support from colleagues.
Actual packing supplies too.
Mm-hmm.
Tape.
Where do we have that stuff? Facilities?
Facilities, yeah.
Okay.
That would all be delivered. We would
Yeah.
just need to know where to deliver it to.
Okay, so do we want to talk about what we were thinking about in terms of a stipend? And this is just for those who have to move physically. So I think what we could do, I think we'd be able to do a $200 stipend for anybody who has to move, and that does not take into consideration, again, this kind of tier level that you talked about. I don't know what else we want to say on that. I know there's a possibility, we talked about being able to use some of our CARES funds for that, which are very quickly depleting, but that's what we talked about there, but we did not talk about, and we would need to we're kind of in a time constraint here, but maybe we just have to do it and figure out in terms of sub support, which would have a financial component, but again, I hope we're talking about very few numbers here.
Yeah.
And then additional support from colleagues. Any creative, what is our ability to, someone says, you know what? I know I'm gonna have to have plans, or I know this is gonna be an extra person in my room, but I really would like a sub in for these days. Can we do that?
Yeah, I mean, right now, we have the building subs in place, and so I
Okay.
think that's a readily available source.
Okay,
I would say, as we're in this remote mode, to bring in a daily sub really doesn't work, right? Because they don't have WebEx access, Canvas, and so on, unless the person was there, I guess. I'm backtracking a little bit, and they could log them in with the kid, or I don't know. We could get creative, potentially. So yeah, I mean, we have those building subs we can easily access.
okay.
So I would be comfortable in providing, or throw it out, a couple days, as a starting point.
I think that goes back to the conversations with the principal about meeting their needs.
Because I think there's also going to be the logistics of, I maybe need to move into a room, but somebody else is trying to move out.
Yeah.
And so, if we have any sort of crossover like that, that's
Yeah.
gonna put a
I'm
jam in
concerned about the availability of those building subs because we were allotted 2 building subs. We had a teacher decide at the last minute to resign, so one of our building subs has moved into that remote position, leaving us with only 1. We've already had 1 teacher have to quarantine this week. Luckily, she was able to teach from home, but what's the chances that there would be building subs available?
Well, I think the stipend is a lot more guaranteed. But, situations like that, we're trying to piecemeal some holes. But we should be, for your specific situation, we should be filling that vacancy with a long-term person, not that building sub. And I know it's just a stopgap right now. So we would be committed to finding your second building sub. But if we knew enough ahead of time, and it's now 2 weeks, that's enough ahead of time, and someone wanted to identify, I want a couple days of a sub, we could certainly get that into place and get them that credential so that they can have WebEx, Canvas, things like that.
Back end point to your $200 stipend. That's like 10 hours of equivalent. That to me seems real low.
Yeah, we started with what we have traditionally done for moving, and that's, I think, been 8 hours.
I think it's really been at least 2 full days. It's been 16 generally when, especially I'm thinking last minute
Right.
kindergarten changes.
So-
I think that it's been allowed up to 16 hours.
And
Yeah.
that's usually when your room's been mostly still, it's been put together, but you're not fully operational. Like, our classrooms are fully operational right now, so the tear down, packing, and then resetting back up is going to take probably 2-3 days at least to really get everything going.
Sure. So the other piece of what we talked about with the stipend was the 200 if you were moving modes, and then 400 if you were changing grade levels, because we felt that was clearly a much larger lift, and that would be that 16 hours.
And that 400 would be the same if you're moving buildings.
Did we talk about that? We didn't.
No, I think it was just great. I think it was, if you're moving, 200 if you're,
Like,
Changing
if you're
grade.
Changing
physically
grade levels.
moving your classroom,
From virtual to
or like moving from one room to another, like moving from one building to another, but you're gonna be
The
third
same
grade
grade.
at Rose Hill, 3rd grade at Brookridge, or whatever, 200? Okay.
And then if you have to change grade levels,
400.
should we consider another tier? Just throwing out a possibility here. So 200 if you're moving modes, in-person to, remote to in-person. I'm literally going back to my classroom at the same grade level, 200. If I'm physically having to move a building in modes, same grade level, you know, I'm just going to throw this out for just 300. And if you are doing both, 400.
And you're still allowing for sub-coverage for a couple days if they needed that.
So I think we need to go back and have that conversation about sub-coverage. And I actually personally like the idea of going back and asking for maybe a couple of additional hours of, phone a friend compensation, because that's what's going to happen. I mean,
Right.
if Rachel, John, and I have a relationship and John's going to have to move, Rachel and I are going to jump in and help him, right? That's just the nature of what teachers do. And I'm going to do that whether I get paid or not, but I do think there is some value in John
It
being
makes it
able to say,
easier.
hey, I have these hours to spend, and Rachel and Michelle, if you'll jump in, blah.
It makes somebody feel better to ask someone, you know?
Right.
They know their friends would do it for free, but you're also probably going to be more efficient with more hands there.
And I forget who made the comment, but it certainly, anyone who's taught knows it, to plan for a sub is a lot more work than actually teaching. And so I just don't know.
Well, and to me, it's not necessarily a sub, it's just a helper to help pack stuff, you know, if it's a classified person, you know, just coming in to help pack some stuff, you know, I think a lot of it necessarily isn't a sub because you're still got to focus there. Just having another set of hands to help take care of the less, you know, the more mundane stuff is helpful.
Is it allowable with our restrictions on visitors to allow spouses and family members to help pack?
I think we would just want to make sure we're following so you've got masks on, you're distancing,
Signing in the office.
signing in, and we're, you know, doing it at a time. I don't know why the buildings would be, this would be before we have students in anyway, so I think.
I think we would have to do it on a case-by-case situation, because we do have some kids being serviced in buildings, and so we would need to be cautious in those areas.
Well, and the point factor of if anybody is moving out, that room probably should have a little bit more of a hit by custodial in between. Because, you know, we talk about somebody moving in as somebody, like if somebody's switching building, there's a lot of cross contamination, whatever that could be, you know.
Okay, so let's outline what we've talked about so far, and tell me if I got this right, because I do kind of like this idea of the tiered approach. Correct me, anybody, if I've got this wrong here. $200 stipend if you are changing modes, but you're staying at your same building in your same grade.
Correct.
$300 if you are changing learning modes, but you're going to a different building, but keeping your same grade.
Yes.
Well, my question on that one is, if you're a remote teacher and you're changing buildings, you still have to pack up your current room at your current building before you go somewhere else.
So that would be like that tier 2.
But that would still be the same amount of time for somebody who is being reassigned to a different building, because they still have to tear down their current classroom and then move it to a new building, new classroom.
Right, that's what I'm meaning. Wouldn't that be that second tier of moving physical classrooms?
I feel that would be in the same as the 400.
If you're
Because
moving.
it's still moving a building and you still have to tear down and the put up of a classroom.
Yeah, but there's no planning for a different grade level.
Yeah.
The 400 is 3 changes, which hopefully, I mean, we have very few, if any, people in that, but that's modes, building, and grade change.
Right.
Versus tier 2 would be modes, building, but no grade change.
Yes.
And then if we're talking about providing hourly comp to a coworker to help you, would we need that help at all tiers? Tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3? Because it's all of these, well, tier 2 only involves a change in learning mode. those individuals still have a classroom, right, that they're already in. So maybe for tier 2 and 3,
I think if you're moving your classroom, that's a helper level. I mean, if you're
Okay.
stepping out of and going from, mode of virtual to back into your own classroom, that's one thing. But if you're having to take your physical classroom and move.
yeah, to
whether
a
it's-
different building.
Or down
Or
the
even down the
hall.
hall.
Or down the hall. Okay, so if there is any physical move of your classroom, then some number of hours of compensation for a coworker to assist. What do we think is, first of all, do we already have an hourly rate established?
Yes.
Yes.
Non-student
Okay.
contact time.
Yes.
If you're moving to a new grade level, you also are going to be asking people who are welcoming that person to that grade level, whether it be a new building or that building, to spend some time getting that person up to speed on the curriculum, in some cases, curriculum resources, where they are in their planning, maybe not to the extent of meeting, but you can't do that in a hour plan period PLC time, because you're in, at that point, you're in the moment. You're going to have help someone be prepared to teach day 1, October 5th.
I think, as a principal of that incoming new staff member, I think it would be good to have some buddy hours, hey, I want you to meet with this person. If you're willing to, I got 2 hours, I can pay you to kind of get them up to speed on how we do things.
Like a welcome mentor.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you could be creative with some sub coverage or some building sub time, is to get extended PLC time for that grade level.
Once they've started on October 5th to start that.
Before that, because if you're changing grade level, you want to know where they are more than anything, and what you're getting ready to start. I don't know. I don't teach elementary, so I defer to elementary people. You may want a little bit on the front end.
Even if you're just joining a new team, every team operates differently. So even if it's the same grade level, but joining a new team, time with them would be very valued.
And I'll say that last year when we got our third teammate in January, now granted it's a little different scenario, but when she came in January, she shadowed us for a week. That's not going to be possible, but I like Linda's idea of the extended PLC time with sub coverage, so that you can say, here's where we have been, this is where we're going, these are the type of kids that are coming, or that the climate is like in our building as far as students are concerned, just so that they can kind of wrap their heads around what they're coming into versus where they were.
Is that doable?
I like it.
Okay.
So what if we gave the principals latitude to provide that building sub coverage on that front end? A day or half a day, something like that.
I'm also wondering if, and I'm going to have to look up the guidelines and some things, but I'm wondering if that Friday afternoon, October 2nd, that we plan for self-directed instruction. And we would
For
meet,
kids, yeah.
we would meet our attendance guidelines in the morning. Again, I just need to process through this a little bit, but maybe the afternoon, really, because you're going to have a lot of changes. I mean, even if I'm a 5th grade teacher that's not moving, but I'm gaining a new teammate, I mean, like Tammy said, every team operates differently. And Laura said, we could talk through some things. It might give some time that Friday afternoon for all teams to welcome new members and kind of make those transitions, and not feeling like I got to be live in 5 minutes, right? And deliver that
So
content.
kind of like a PLC for that afternoon for, elementary.
We have to be
district level.
careful
Whatever we
saying that.
call it,
Yes. I just need to-
Whatever the
let me-
right word
Let me
is.
figure out the logistics of that and see if we can pull that off. I need to talk to a few team members to make sure that we could do that. But I think as long as, we couldn't say it's professional learning, we couldn't say that, but I do think that we could give remote instruction. I mean, we don't have to be live 6 hours a day, right? We have to take attendance, but, maybe we do an afternoon meeting. Everybody does an afternoon meeting or something remotely, and then we sign off for the rest of the day to plan accordingly. I don't know, I literally just made that up as we were going, but I mean.
like it.
Logistically,
might be
that would probably be
beneficial.
better than trying to use building subs, because again, if there's 4 people on a grade level team, we don't have that many building subs.
Sure.
Right.
It's a good idea.
Is there a way, like, through CNI or like through principals to reach out to say, like, asking, hey, do you have like a Canvas that's, working really well for you, that we could get some of those options for people that if they are having to move grade levels, that
Yes.
they're not starting from scratch?
There's a lot.
I know there's a lot,
There's
and
a
I,
lot.
there's been, it's been really great, like Engage New York, you can go on and pull the whole thing down. But, so if there's something where it's like, I can pull down 6th grade, and I'm gonna tweak it the way works best for my classroom, but at least there's some content in there, there's some things I can pull down right away to.
I was
like a
actually-
template, that's what it is?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. I made myself a note to talk to our both instructional coach team and curriculum coordinators about this idea around teachers' manuals and courses already built in the commons area. And I think the answer is yes to that. I definitely think we could connect people to resources to help with the Canvas piece, for sure.
And have some turnkey stuff available for that
Because I
Friday
think
afternoon.
it's ultimately not going to come down to like knowing how to use Canvas. It's just
Having a
Setting it
functional-
up, right?
to set it up and like just devoting the time to getting everything in there, starting from scratch would be a lot. That would be really overwhelming.
Sure.
I
Those
just
sound
had
like-
this sudden urge to walk up thinking about resetting up everything.
I know.
This is how I'm going to show you how excited I am, because I couldn't say this statement 3 weeks ago. But they could create a sandbox as soon as they know, and then someone could help them get that ready and then import it over. So,
Yeah. But I think
maybe it
just
won't be
the
as
time
daunting, but
involved.
just even knowing what the curriculum, I mean, you're going to know wonders, you're going to know some of the standby things, but you might need some help with.
But just getting it all in there is gonna take some time.
Okay, those sound like 2 really good supports for those individuals who are gonna have to change grades.
I think the only thing you had left out there was the buddy support.
Yeah, and how many hours we're
was
kind of
about-
outside of our budgetary authority
We
period.
are.
We can, I think again, we're not talking about that many people impacted, and if Russ chews me out, then that's what happens next, I guess. But, I think we can, at least do a couple hours, 2 or 3.
That's what I was thinking.
And I think that also goes back to the principle of having that conversation of like, hey, you got 2 or 3 hours for this, but if somebody's moving that has been in the same room for 10 years and they're gonna need some extra help, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what if we did this approach? I mean, when Rachel said the CARES funding is running out quickly, it is. I mean, that's a real scenario for us.
Yeah.
We're going to know more about numbers in the next couple of days. Once we know more about numbers, we can run all these scenarios and we can say, well, we ran all these numbers, here's where we are. We have enough budget room to provide this, or we have enough budget room to provide this, and see what that really looks like. Because it's hard to commit money when you don't know how many people, how many hours, how many people changing content and grade levels. So could we kind of wait until we have these numbers in the next 48 and run those scenarios and kind of shoot it out to you all, and maybe even have a conversation about it electronically?
With these tiers being fairly,
We would know the tier budget, we would know how many hours
yeah.
of,
Because I think that's hard for us too, as far as like looking at 200, 300, 400, like without knowing how many people are impacted and, how this is all gonna kind of shake out, like it's. difficult to really.
When do you think we would have that? Because if we meet again, it's got to be noticed. Or we could do a committee. We could have 2 people get together, I think. We got to stay in compliance with, COMA.
I think Monday afternoon, we'd have a pretty good idea.
I would agree.
Because I think, does everyone agree that these stipends are going to have to be incorporated into the salary schedule, and we're going to have to, aren't we going to have to?
be a,
It's like an amendment, right?
Like an MOU.
Yeah, or an
That's the
MOU.
word
We
I
can
was
do an
looking
MOU.
Could we meet Monday afternoon at, 3:30 and just do it virtually?
Is that give enough time to get the numbers?
I think we'll have a
we'll be
fairly
good.
good idea. It might not be perfect, but I think we'll have enough to commit
To
to
know
the
that we're
budget.
not overspending and then
Yeah.
getting us in trouble. Okay.
Can we do
We
it?
have our NEA building rep meetings are on what will be next Monday at 4:30.
So if we could do it in an hour, it's
Uh-huh.
WebEx and Zoom.
I think we can do it the question is, if we do it just in WebEx Teams, it's not going to be live stream. So does anyone have issue with that?
What we would need to do to comply with COMA is that if anybody else wants to participate, and I'll do this on the notice, they need to let us know so we can get them the login information.
Or do we live stream it? I don't know. I'm asking.
Can we live stream WebEx Teams? Oh, good. Okay. So, we'll get a notice out for 3:30 on Monday to comply with COMA. We will do our homework. I hopefully don't anticipate, I think these numbers that we've talked about, we can be close, and if it's a small number, that's even better. What other homework do we need to do?
I think that's it for right
That's it,
now.
yeah.
To those teachers that participated today, thank you. I just feel like, I'm the most ignorant of everyone in this group because, I have taught at the college level, but not at the K-12 level. And so some of this is lost on me, but it's not lost on the other members of our, administrative team. And some of what you guys said is that what we anticipated, but there are some things that we didn't. And I'm glad that we heard them here. And I'm glad we have some concrete plans, and know where kind of the challenges are and the points that are going to be stressful. And something I was ignorant on, frankly, was the emotional piece of it. That's just not something I'm familiar with, and I'm glad that, I'm glad we have that and we can be careful. I am an emotional person. I just get connection. David's laughing at me. Connections, though, with students over such a short amount of time, that's an amazing statement and testament, I think, to our teachers.
is that how lawyers don't have feelings?
No, just maybe not when we're at work. So we'll get together, and anyone who wants to watch the 3:30 meeting and kind of see how this is finalized will have the ability to do so. There'll be a notice that goes out on how to access it. And does anyone think we need Stephanie there for that?
No.
Is anyone uncomfortable? Okay, so Stephanie, we won't
Okay.
have you participate in that.
Now, before you do, before this committee gets off, I want to confirm that I am with you again in October. And I think that you all still were looking at, in October, I know we're sort of moving off subject, you were going to look at your negotiating process document that someone was pulling together, I think. Although you may have something come up that bumps that, but I just don't want to let that get off our screen.
Yes.
Am I right, Rachel?
Yes, and hopefully, and you guys, I always want to appropriately prioritize if there's, I know what we're in, and what we're in is an unprecedented time. And so I do think it's, our negotiation process, I think it's important we get it finalized before we head into the spring. But
These are
please tell me, IDB team, if you're like,
sensitive
we gotta talk about this, we gotta hear from teachers on this, we gotta address this. If something is critical or time sensitive, we should prioritize appropriately on our agenda, I think.
Sounds good, guys. If you do need anything from me, let me know. I'm not going to end the meeting until you guys are done, but I am going to go on mute and stop my video, and I will plan on seeing the larger group in October, but I'll leave it open for y'all to do.
Lindsay, I would add, if you have it there, I can't
Thank you.
see it, but furniture.
Oh, yeah, furniture.
Should we also put in there manuals, or you guys, I know you have no.
Teacher resources.
Yeah.
I've got actually probably several things on here that maybe not on there. So I have teacher resources, which would include manuals, just access to help, both, well, you've got the volunteers up there, but I think also curriculum help, instructional coach help, whatever that might look like in regards to helping me transition to a new grade level. I also have this idea around some subscriptions that you mentioned. And
Nearpod.
actually, someone already responded to me saying, if this is a special education question, to reach out to your building sped admin, because they've already purchased some of those and they are considering purchasing more, so.
I think also just
General.
elementary in general.
So I'd say reach out to your principals, in that case.
Okay.
Let me look and see what else real quick.
Is that a fit?
Considerations around that large class aid, that it would need to be multiple not shared. I have mental health of teachers, we need to continue to keep the forefront.
I might have been.
Budgetary supplies, maybe a supply line for a budget if I'm changing grade levels. I heard that. I might need some additional supply money.
Or hitting like the PTAs of like, you know, like
Yep, of that, yep.
Target gift card, you know, that kind
I heard consideration, I don't, Amber, I'm gonna be upfront, I don't know if we can do this, but it's something I'm willing to ask, to talk about, and some consideration for additional
Safety.
plan time for people that are teaching in both environments. And then the other thing that I heard is for us to consider would be supervision for specials teachers to allow them to teach remotely. Again, I don't know, I'm not guaranteeing any of these things, but they're definitely things that we will commit to look at and continue to look at. And that's what I have, so if I missed anything.
So I got
We're gonna do everything that we feasibly can, you guys.
absolutely.
To try and support you. And thank you for not just being here today, but for everything that you do for our students and for doing everything you can to make Shawnee Mission successful through what may be the most challenging time in all of our careers. We appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy.
Before we end, I just want to say thank you all for participating today. I know it's one more thing on your plate, and we all have a lot on our plates right now. So thanks for taking the time to share feedback with us. Much appreciated.
Thank
It's
you so
nice
much,
to meet
guys.
you guys, too.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us a voice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
We're all leaving meeting, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Just did.
See you guys at the next one.
Oh, hi, Jill.